The message did not come gently. It felt like a punishment that had already been decided behind my back. My name is Nixera. I am 32 years old, and I thought I was still part of my own family. It happened in the family group chat. Not privately, not with kindness, but in front of everyone who mattered to me. My father typed a message that still feels unreal when I think about it. We've decided you should step away for now. There was no reason given, no gentle follow-up, no hesitation. Just a clear instruction to remove myself from a space I had helped keep together for years, with my money and my care. My mother said nothing in the chat, which felt heavier than any insult she could have typed. I stared at the screen for a long time before typing back because I refused to argue in public or beg for a place I had earned. My reply was simple, calm, and final. I'll respect that and step away from the family entirely. A moment later, my sister reacted with a celebration emoji. That reaction said more than words ever could. That night, I did not cry. I did not call anyone. I opened the investment account I had built using my name, my credit, my trust. My hands did not shake. My breathing stayed steady. I made one quiet decision. That night, I closed the $285,000 investment I had set aside for them. Before this story continues, take a moment to think about what happened. What came next changed everything I thought I knew about loyalty, family, and self-respect. Before everything fell apart, our family was already barely holding on. We had a small seafood shack, a little restaurant near the water. People used to line up for fried shrimp, crab boils, and grilled fish. It was the kind of place where neighbors came together, where everyone knew each other, and where the smell of the sea and fried food felt like home. But when things started to get bad, they did not get bad slowly. Everything collapsed at once. Mom was the first to react, but not with solutions. She walked through the restaurant with a worried face, flipping through unpaid bills, whispering numbers to herself, checking the same pile over and over as if that could fix anything. Dad reacted in the opposite way. He started making chaotic decisions, ordering more food even when the refrigerators were full, taking short-term loans without reading the fine print, promising discounts we could not afford. When they spoke, it felt less like leadership and more like panic pretending to be in control. My sister Vespera was supposed to be the creative part of the family. She talked about rebranding, social media, partnerships, but she never changed her schedule, never stayed late, never helped with vendors. Something changed between us quietly, and I felt it immediately. Vespera started feeling distant every day. I had my own plans back then, plans that needed focus, moving and saving money. But I paused all of them without telling anyone or asking for credit. I started showing up after my own workdays, quietly watching the numbers, counting what was coming in and what was going out. I did not ask for ownership, a title, or praise. The first time I sent money to help, it was quiet. No one knew. I looked at the numbers, saw how many days the restaurant could survive, and sent enough to keep it going a little longer. I told no one. I treated it like fixing a bolt before something snapped. That was also the moment I stopped helping from a distance. I started controlling what I could. I built simple tracking systems, separated bills by urgency, redirected vendor payments, spoke to suppliers so late fees wouldn't ruin relationships. I was no longer just a daughter trying to help. I quietly became the one holding everything upright, while everyone else reacted. By the time I realized how much I had gotten involved, stepping back felt impossible. By the second summer, nothing serious happened without my approval. The business started to survive again, not because luck changed, but because someone stayed awake long enough to face what had been ignored. Days stopped feeling random. Every payment, every supplier delay, every broken piece of equipment had a voice waiting for answers. That voice was mine. Seafood suppliers were the first big problem. Conversations become uncomfortable fast because unpaid balances do not disappear just because a family is tired. I learned how to speak without apologizing, how to buy time without lying, how to explain numbers without showing weakness. Extensions and agreements came one by one. Kitchen equipment contracts were another challenge. Freezers broke, stoves needed repair, rental companies stopped believing excuses. Papers were revised. Penalty fees were delayed. Every conversation needed calm, even when my hands were tense. Every agreement needed pressure, even when my voice stayed level. Debts did not vanish, but they stopped growing wild. Old balances were pulled into clear lists. Numbers became problems sitting in front of me, not hiding in folders. I stopped treating money like storms that pass on their own and started treating it like broken pipes that needed fixing. That change made everything better. Vespera did not disappear. Her presence was in stories, updates, smiles for cameras. She did not touch the work, but she got visibility. Compliments went to her, questions were directed to her, while the pressure stayed on me. Something quiet hardened inside me, but it never became shouting or drama. It became a distance that grew without announcement. My parents slowly began depending on me without saying it. Decisions came to me without explanation. Bills waited for my review. Problems came to my phone. Responsibility stopped feeling like a favor and started feeling like an expectation. What changed most was not the work, but the silence around it. There was no appreciation, no gratitude, no celebrations. Things worked when I touched them and collapsed when I stepped away. A few months before the business looked stable, the tone in the family changed. Compliments started going to places that felt wrong. Even when nothing serious had changed, voices praised Vespera instead of me. Dad talked about her instincts in front of staff, repeated her name in meetings where my presence went unnoticed. Mom smiled longer at her. Outside the building, Vespera shaped the story confidently. She spoke to vendors, explained the business, and made my involvement seem small. I understood the shift had gone beyond misunderstanding. It was intentional. The story was no longer shared. It was being rewritten. One afternoon, a manager approached me quietly, not scared but careful. He said he had been told not to bring reports directly to me anymore. He asked me to be patient, but patience felt useless when space was taken without consent. The storage area behind the kitchen became a place where truth existed without effort. I walked through narrow aisles while voices floated freely, thinking they were private. My name was spoken without warmth. My role was described as temporary, emotional, unnecessary. Each word hurt more than anger could, not because it was loud, but because it was calm. I did not interrupt. I did not correct. I did not defend myself. Silence wrapped around me while everything I had built was reduced through whispers. Meetings happened without me. The chairs were filled with people who had once asked for my guidance. Calendars closed without my access. Conversations stopped when I entered the room, as if I did not belong. My phone went quiet for decisions that once needed my voice. The distance grew without any announcement. The most painful part was not losing credit, but being slowly erased. No one said I was no longer needed. No voices raised. No arguments. They simply stopped including me, stopped acknowledging me, stopped turning to me when serious matters appeared. It was polite, quiet, controlled, and deeply hurtful in ways that could not be debated. Every day became harder because I had given so much and received so little. I kept quiet, even though my heart felt like it was breaking a little each day. I watched the business slowly move forward, but it moved without me. The work I had done, the nights I had stayed up, the money I had sent, all of it was being forgotten as if it had never mattered. I learned to keep my feelings inside. I learned to smile while being ignored. I learned to answer questions carefully, even when the answers were obvious to everyone else. I learned to carry the weight quietly, to fix problems without needing recognition, to keep the business alive while slowly being erased. Every day felt like walking through a house that was mine, but slowly everyone was moving out without telling me. I started keeping my own notes, my own list of what needed fixing. I kept track of who owed money, who needed supplies, which bills were coming. I spoke to suppliers late at night, so they would not cancel orders. I fixed broken machines, negotiated repairs, and made sure the business kept going. Every small success felt empty because nobody noticed. But I could not stop. If I stopped, everything would collapse. Even when I worked quietly, I noticed how my parents' attention shifted. Every compliment, every smile, every small thank you went to Vespera. She had never stayed late, she had never checked the bills, she had never negotiated with suppliers. But she was praised as if she had done all the work. My presence was invisible. The hard work I had done was invisible. My care, my effort, my money, my sleepless nights, they were all invisible. It was painful, yes, but it also taught me something important. I learned that sometimes the people you trust the most can fail to see what you are doing. Sometimes family does not mean they will appreciate you. Sometimes the people closest to you can rewrite history to make themselves look better. And yet, even though I was invisible, I remained steady. I did my job. I fixed my problems. I kept the business alive. I stayed calm while chaos moved around me. I spoke to suppliers carefully. I explained the numbers clearly. I negotiated repairs. I fixed broken machines. I made sure no one noticed the disaster that could have happened if I had stopped. I also learned to protect myself. I learned that money and effort can be taken for granted. I learned that love and loyalty are not always returned. I learned that silence can hurt more than anger. I learned that being kind and helpful does not guarantee recognition. And I learned that sometimes the best decision is to step back and protect what belongs to you. When my father told me to step away, it hurt, but it also gave me clarity. I realized that I had been holding everything together, but my family had decided to ignore me. They had chosen to celebrate Vespera and erase me quietly, step by step. It was deliberate. It was cruel. And it was something I could no longer accept. That night, I made my decision quietly, calmly. I closed the $285,000 investment I had set aside for my family. I took what was mine. I protected what I had earned. I did not shout. I did not cry. I did not argue. I simply acted. And in that quiet action, I reclaimed some power over my life. From that night onward, I stopped being invisible in my own mind. I knew what I had done, what I had built, what I had saved. My family may have celebrated Vespera and erased me, but I knew the truth. I knew how much I had done, how much I had cared, how much I had saved the business. And that knowledge was mine alone. Sometimes, family can hurt in ways that are quiet, controlled, and polite. But even in that quiet pain, you can find strength. You can learn to protect yourself. You can learn to recognize your own value. And you can learn that loyalty and love do not always come from the people you expect. Even though I was erased, even though my work was ignored, even though my parents and sister had rewritten the story, I remained steady. I had done the work. I had fixed the problems. I had saved the business. And that could never be taken away from me. In the end, I understood something very important. You can give everything to people and still be invisible to them. You can love people and still be erased. But the work you do, the care you give, the money you save, and the problems you fix, that stays with you. That is your strength. That is your story. And no one can rewrite it without your permission. So I stepped back from the family. I took what was mine. I protected what I had built. And I let the quiet erasure of years become the reason I finally put myself first. I let my actions speak louder than the silent celebrations and the whispered words of others. And in that quiet, I began to heal. Because even when people ignore you, even when family hurts you, even when your hard work is erased, you still have yourself. You still have your mind, your hands, your heart, your decisions. And that is enough to start again. I stayed quiet for a long time, even longer than I probably should have. I didn't stay quiet because I was weak or scared, but because I thought that if I argued or spoke up, I might lose the little space I still had. I believed that keeping quiet was safer. I didn't fight to be noticed. I wasn't angry to cause trouble or make a scene. I wasn't even trying to get praise or attention. I stayed quiet because I was afraid of making things worse, and that fear quietly guided every decision I made. For years, I kept working in the spaces where I was still accepted. I tried to do my part, even though I could feel the story of my family slowly moving further away from me. Each week, I watched things change, and I realized that by the time anyone else noticed, the changes had already taken place inside me. It was as if I had been erased bit by bit without anyone asking me. One quiet Sunday night, my phone vibrated. The sound was simple, ordinary, nothing dramatic, but I will never forget it. A message appeared. It didn't come with warning, tension, or drama, but it carried a weight heavier than any argument I had ever had before. I had been sitting quietly, thinking about bills that needed paying, about suppliers who had delayed orders, and about the quiet responsibilities I had carried for years, responsibilities I never asked for but that I had taken on because someone had to. I picked up my phone almost without thinking, expecting just another small problem or another tiny responsibility to quietly handle. I still believed that my role in the family mattered. Even if no one said it, I thought my loyalty had value. I thought the care and effort I put in counted for something. But when I read the words, I realized how wrong I had been. The message was already waiting for me. It was simple and direct, like it had been prepared long before I ever saw it. Like someone had planned to send it when I was tired and least ready to respond. It read, "We've decided you should step away for now," Dad wrote. The message appeared in our family group chat. The same chat where we used to plan holidays, share family problems, and ask each other's opinions. There was no warmth in the words. There was no softening, no thank you, or we appreciate you. Just a decision, written long before I saw it, delivered without care for how it would feel. It felt like reading something official, like a letter or a form, not like a message from someone who loved or cared about me. I realized in that moment that I had not been in the room where this decision was made. For a very long time, I had been left out. There was no follow-up message. No one tried to explain. Mom stayed quiet, and her silence felt intentional. It wasn't an accident. Her quiet agreement made everything even heavier. It showed that this decision wasn't just Dad's alone. It was shared. It was final. I could feel it deep down. This wasn't a mistake. I had been quietly removed from a family that no longer valued me, and they didn't even feel the need to soften it. I read the message slowly, not because I didn't understand it, but because I understood it far too well. This wasn't a question. This wasn't a chance to discuss or explain myself. It was a decision that had been made long before I was ever invited. I typed carefully, choosing my words with precision. I didn't add emotion. I didn't get angry. I didn't beg or argue. I wrote, "I'll respect that and step away from the family entirely." I didn't justify myself. I didn't list sacrifices or explain my efforts. Explanations only matter when the people reading them care about the truth. I could already feel that the truth no longer had a place in this space. Seconds later, my older sister reacted to my message. She didn't write back. She didn't ask a single question. She just tapped a celebration emoji. That little symbol felt louder than any argument because it was honest. It showed exactly how she felt. The group chat went quiet again, and this silence felt permanent. No one tried to soften the blow. No one tried to repair anything. No one showed concern. The quiet felt deliberate, solid, and final. That night, I finally understood that what I had called family had quietly moved on without me. That night did not end in shouting or crying. It ended in clarity. I was removed not by accident, but by agreement, from a family that only valued me when I was useful and celebrated the moment I was no longer needed. The next morning, I woke up quietly, but my mind was clear. I wasn't confused. I didn't hesitate. I didn't feel the usual pressure of wondering how to fix problems that were never truly mine. The room looked ordinary. The light looked normal. But my thoughts moved with a clarity I had not felt in years. There was no anger driving me. There was no desire to prove anything. There was only calm. A calm decision had already formed in me while everyone else slept. I sat at my desk and opened the investment account that had carried more weight than most people understood. This was the account I had used to keep the restaurant alive during emergencies, paying bills, covering supplier delays, making sure the business didn't collapse while everyone else acted as if nothing was wrong. I logged in calmly without rushing because I was no longer reacting. I wasn't trying to save something that had already chosen to function without me. The numbers were clean and precise on the screen. I reviewed them once, not because I doubted myself, but out of habit. Then I transferred the entire $285,000, the exact amount I had invested to keep their business alive. I watched the confirmation load without feeling triumphant or regretful. It felt procedural, like closing a chapter that had been left open far too long. Immediately, I removed their access. I blocked every financial permission. I revoked every shared authorization, every linked device, and every connected channel. I didn't hesitate. Hesitation had already cost me too much time. I didn't worry about appearances because I had spent years worrying about appearances while being quietly erased. Later that morning, I contacted my Theron, who had helped me with legal and financial paperwork before. This time, his role mattered in real life, not just on paper. I explained everything clearly and directly, without exaggeration, without emotional distortion, and without leaving room for interpretation. He listened silently. His silence told me that what I described was not surprising but extremely clear. Theron began preparing immediate legal boundaries. He advised that I protect myself before the situation could be twisted into something legally dangerous. He said that silence would be safer than explanations, and that documentation would be stronger than emotional conversations. That afternoon, I drafted an email. I didn't overthink it. I didn't add dramatic sentences. I didn't include personal pain. I simply wrote that I was terminating every legal and financial role associated with the business. I wrote that I would not be available for consultation, approvals, financial negotiations, or operational direction. Before sending it, I reread the email once, not for doubt, but to make sure it was accurate. Then I sent it. After sending the email, I sat still for a long time. There was no relief crashing over me. There was no excitement. There was only understanding. I had finally stopped putting energy into a place that had quietly stopped seeing me as part of its structure. I felt grounded, calm, and still. I didn't check my phone for reactions. I didn't wait for anger or apologies. I didn't prepare defenses. I understood that the silence that would follow would be loud, but it would belong to them, not to me. That morning changed everything. Not because I shouted, not because I demanded anything, but because I was finished. 1 week later, the damage started showing everywhere. What had seemed stable before now felt fragile. I didn't need to watch closely to understand what was happening. The signals came from people who had worked with us for years. They no longer sounded confident when they spoke. The first problems came from the seafood suppliers. They stopped confirming delivery schedules. They ignored invoices. They delayed trucks without explanation. Old partners who had once trusted simple phone calls now needed paperwork guarantees and proof of available money before agreeing to help. Some stopped answering completely. The quiet panic inside operations was noticeable. Employees began leaving too. Some were honest about why they left. They said they had heard rumors about paychecks not being safe. Others left quietly, submitting resignation letters without confrontation or explanation. Former supervisors told me that staff were worried about whether their wages would be protected and whether the restaurant could survive another month under unclear leadership. Banks and lenders started reviewing everything with new intensity. Loans that had once been simple to manage were now flagged for review. Documents were requested again. Legal departments started inspecting the structure of the business with much more attention. Agreements that were once signed without hesitation suddenly needed formal scrutiny. Clauses that had never mattered before now mattered. Legal language became stricter around every transaction. Inside the company, Vespera was pushed into visibility in ways she had never experienced. Investors, auditors, and outside consultants started asking direct questions about her role, her authority, and her understanding of the financial systems. She was suddenly under pressure to show that she understood what had been happening for years without her. All of this happened quietly, without me needing to interfere. I didn't need to watch closely. I didn't need to explain or fix anything. The system that had once been supported quietly by my effort was now showing cracks because the people who relied on me no longer had access to the knowledge, the money, or the decision-making they had depended on. I felt no triumph. I felt no gloating. I felt calm. Everything had shifted in a way that allowed me to finally step away, to finally close a chapter of my life that had been open for far too long. The clarity I felt that morning stayed with me, steady and strong. I could finally move forward without the weight of responsibilities that were never truly mine. The family, the business, the systems, they all had to adjust to my absence. Suppliers, employees, partners, and banks all began to respond to the change. The stability that everyone thought existed had been quietly maintained for years by my effort. And now, without me, the truth of the situation became visible. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. I felt clear. I felt calm. And that calm was not empty, it was full of understanding. I had been quiet for too long, but my quiet had been purposeful. It had allowed me to see clearly, act deliberately, and protect myself. No one apologized. No one came to explain. No one tried to make things right. And that was okay. I didn't need that. I had learned something that money, power, or status could never teach me. My worth is not determined by how useful others find me, but by how I choose to value myself and protect myself. She was asked to explain things she had hardly ever done before, things she barely even knew about. She was asked to make choices she had never had to make herself. Meetings that used to praise her work now felt different. Instead of saying she was doing well, people began to notice how little control she actually had. It was as if everyone suddenly saw that she was holding a very heavy part of the business all by herself. When the pressure became real, rumors started to appear quietly about people thinking of going to court. Lawyers began calling, asking for papers, records, and agreements. Different people started talking about legal action because they felt lied to or worried about money or responsibility. The idea of going to court stopped being just a scary thought. It became a plan that some people were quietly getting ready for, with papers and documents that I knew existed because I had once helped organize them. What surprised me most was not the chaos or the mess. It was how normal and predictable it all felt. For many years, I had quietly held fragile parts of the system together. I had done it without being recognized, without anyone respecting me, and without anyone protecting me. Once I stopped helping, no one else took over. Decisions began to slow down. Fear began to spread quietly among the people who worked there. People began to lose confidence in private long before it showed in public. My phone started ringing more often. Messages came more frequently. Some calls were from people who sounded nervous, their voices shaky. Some were from people who sounded sorry, saying things that felt like apologies. Others spoke very carefully, choosing their words like they already knew the situation could not be fixed easily. I didn't answer any of the calls. I didn't respond to any of the messages. I watched from a distance that felt clean, controlled, and fair. Mom and Dad stopped appearing in the internal communications that used to feel automatic. The messages that once felt normal now felt empty. They no longer sounded certain when they spoke in private. Control moved from authority to damage control, and even that felt shaky and unsteady. Vespera was left alone, facing questions she had never expected to answer, carrying a level of responsibility she had not anticipated without any assistance. By the end of that week, the business no longer looked strong from the inside. It looked weak. It looked exposed. It looked like something that had lost its true foundation long before anyone realized it. I did not feel happy about the collapse. I did not celebrate it. I did not feel satisfaction from watching things fall apart. What I felt was clarity. Problems do not arrive loudly. They arrive quietly, and then the quiet becomes impossible to ignore. 1 month later, my life felt calm for the first time. I no longer woke up and checked messages that were never meant for me. My phone stayed quiet for long stretches of time. The silence felt earned, like I had finally done something to deserve it, rather than empty or lonely. The distance I had created between myself and the business began to feel natural. My mind finally accepted that peace did not need permission. Mom tried calling me first. Her number appeared on my phone early in the morning. It stayed there for a few seconds and then disappeared when I chose not to pick up. Dad followed later that week. He left a voicemail that sounded careful, polite, and different from before. This time there were no demands. There were no assumptions. There was no pressure. There was only hesitation, layered with a polite tone that had never been necessary before. They asked if I would meet them and talk privately. They said they wanted to rebuild and start over. They didn't make me promises about how things would be. They simply asked if I would consider coming back. They called it a chance to fix things, a gesture of unity that sounded better in words than in reality. They promised respect and admitted mistakes had been made. They invited me to sit down and discuss roles. They suggested that everything could be balanced again if I agreed to step back into the picture. I declined every offer. I did not argue, I did not feel angry, and I did not hesitate. I had made my choice. I chose a different way to structure my days. I built routines that answered only to my own standards and my own time. I opened accounts that belonged only to me and kept my money separate from any shared control. My decisions no longer required approval or explanations from anyone else. That freedom felt steady, not reckless. Work became focused. Growth became personal. Stability became something I created instead of something I begged to keep. I stopped measuring my worth through family roles or outdated expectations. The urge to prove myself disappeared as soon as I stopped standing in rooms that required performance. My life became quieter in the best way. It was filled with predictable routines, honest effort, and outcomes that belonged only to me. Even my thoughts began to slow down, as if my mind had finally been given space to breathe without fear of interruption or correction. I learned an important lesson through this process. The lesson was simple. Boundaries are not acts of rebellion. They are acts of survival and self-respect, especially inside families where old feelings often replace accountability. When you draw a line, you are not abandoning people. You are protecting the part of yourself that allows you to live without resentment, fear, or invisible debt. Real peace appears when you stop chasing validation from people who only value access to you. When you stop trying to please everyone, you start to see what life can really be. You start to see that quiet days, steady routines, and decisions that belong only to you are not scary. They are safe. They are yours. And once you have them, it feels like your mind and your heart can finally rest. You realize that peace doesn't have to come from anyone else. You can make it yourself. You don't need anyone to approve or say it is okay. You just live day by day, and each day feels better than the last because you are the one in control. And in that control, in that quiet space, I finally understood what freedom really meant. I understood that the part of me that had been protecting others for years also needed protection. And when I protected it, everything else in life started to feel lighter. My choices were mine, my days were mine, and my peace was mine. That lesson, simple but powerful, stayed with me, and it changed everything.